Let's talk to former Conservative Party advisor and Chief of Staff to David Cameron, Alex Deane. Welcome, Alex.
Hi, Kevin.
What do you make of I mean, I'm encouraged by the direction of travel in terms of Rishi and his Tory government, but I am suspicious of the level of commitment because a guy who says, right, I'm encouraging far more oil and gas drilling in the North Sea. I've handed out 100 new licences. Great, I think that makes sense. But how does that sit hand in hand with his continued devoted commitment to carbon net zero by 2050? The two don't go together, do they?
Well, I share your position of liking the direction of travel. Let me try and answer your questions to why I think you can trust where the Prime Minister is. Conservative views, like the ones you've just been expressing, and political benefit row in the same direction. The Uxbridge and South Ruislip by-elections show that there is political mileage, no pun intended, in having a gap between the Conservative Party and the Labour Party on these issues. And on the example you just chose, continuing with North Sea exploration puts, again, no pun intended, clear blue water between the parties on a jobs issue and a UK energy sovereignty issue. So I think it's smart politics as well as Conservative positioning. I think they'll do it. OK, well, fingers crossed. But he announces also, again, encouraging, a review of the hated low traffic neighbourhood schemes, which sounds good. But, I mean, how long will that review take? And will it actually result in the cancellation of any LTNs? Again, I'm doubtful on both fronts, but I hope he actually does commit to it. Will he? I think so. I think he'll let local authorities have more power over those things. But I mean, I can tell you, Kevin, I've moved recently from Elephant and Castle, where Tories are rarer than the elephants, to leafy Dulwich, which has been, I mean, the harm that the LTNs have done in Dulwich is really quite hard to explain to people who aren't trying to drive around it. But if I take the other point that's been going through the whole of London recently with the ultra-low emission zones, ULEZ can expand over time, as the combustible engines are phased out by market forces and cars are getting better and better, and particular levels in the air are getting smaller and smaller anyway. They're falling very fast. Delay on ULEZ, in my view, is really sensible. And so you get the benefit of not seeming like a headbanger like Sadiq Khan. You get the benefit of being on the side of the motorist and conservative inclined voters, and you get to do the right thing all at once. So I really do think the government's going in the right direction on this.
I do too, and I'm sure you may have experienced a similar unusual experience to me last week when I found myself wholeheartedly agreeing with Tony Blair, who had the temerity to inject some logic into the argument that the Greenies never like to hear, which is the very obvious thing. Look, we produce less than 1% of the world's global carbon emissions. And we've done a lot to reduce our emissions, so we're under 1%. So even if we got rid of the little emissions that we now emit, even if we got ourselves down to zero by all living in mud huts and going around on horses, it would make no difference. It would make no difference. So those of us who think about this, we say, why is it you're asking me to change my car, not go to Spain, adapt my lifestyle, spend these big levies on my energy bills for something that will make no difference to the global pollution problem?
It's amazing, isn't it? If you or I dared to suggest that Chinese output is so significant that it dwarfs anything we do in the UK, and if we close down the country completely, the difference would be made up by the Chinese in a financial quarter or two, we'd be depersoned, hauled off to CHR, have our knuckles
bank accounts cancelled.
Exactly. But if Tony Blair says it, then suddenly people think that's a very sensible point, actually. Well, ironically, it is a sensible point, and I'm really glad he said it. And I think the reason is Tony Blair really wants the Labour Party to win the next election. And I think he's showing the way on the left by saying that working people shouldn't have to bear the brunt of climate change measures. People want us to help to do what we can on the environment, as long as it's not too personally punishing. Recycling, sure. Compulsory heat pumps and stripping out your boiler at a net cost to you about 20 grand by state order? No thanks.
Absolutely. Still with green issues, the chief executive of National Gas, a guy called John Butterworth, again, I think this is probably injecting a little truth into the argument. He says that heat pumps are for the privileged few, that most people can't afford them. And others, not John, but others have said, well, once you've spent £30,000 getting your heat pump installed, you might be rather disappointed. They're not that effective. Yeah. So, again, this is part and parcel of us all going green. But a lot of people can't afford an electric car. They're about twice as expensive as petrol cars. And certainly people can't afford heat pumps. So, once again, these are policies that the majority of people find hard to prioritise, to put at the top of their personal agendas.
Yeah, I think that's right. And to add an example to what you've just been saying, Kevin, I thought the interesting one was this weekend from Lord Hockey, who is not just a business tycoon, he's a Labour peer and owns a heat pump company. And he says that heat pumps are unsuitable in Scotland because in large parts of Scotland, because their performance decline markedly in freezing weather. Well, as you will appreciate, parts of Scotland hit minus 15 degrees last winter. Yeah. So, he also pointed out that in cooler climates, heat pumps don't get warm enough to kill off Legionnaire's disease. Well, that sounds like a recipe for success. So if even the makers are telling you it's not a one-size-fits-all solution, if even Labour peers are telling you it's not a one-size-fits-all solution, it's about time to listen.
Yeah, I've got a great new heating system. Slight problem, it doesn't work when it's cold.
And it gives me Legionnaires.
Yeah, I can see some shortfalls there, some slight problems. Alex, fantastic to talk to you. Thanks you very much for your time. As former Tory party advisor, former chief of staff to David Cameron, Alex Deane.